Hello, New Zealand. We are back. This is episode 6. We have made it, and to my left is my colleague Simon O'Connor. How are you, Simon?
Look, I always find it endearing when people say I'm to the left of them. It's a very unusual situation.
You are left wing as I have ever seen you, but to the audience, you are right wing. So that's all that matters. Look, we have got a lot of topics to talk about. We've also got some latest polling that we need to look at. There's a fascinating study out of Victoria University we're going to discuss. The latest euthanasia report, which was, in my view, hidden. You might want to make some comment on that shortly. And apparently we're going to treat misogyny as extremism. That's just a little lineup of what's been happening in the political world. I'll tell you, Simon, when we first started the show, it was kind of like, are we going to find enough material to sort of fill in half an hour? To be honest, I think we could probably spend every week talking for 2 hours and not get through all the material. It just never ends, and the change of government hasn't stopped some of the craziness that's going on. What's actually happening in Wellington?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's not unusual. I mean, this is politics. It's always something happening. I mean, it's sort of why you still have MPs. It's why, busy, beyond busy for years. There's always something happening. But look, if you want to look at the left-right split, to put it really, really crudely, the left obviously brings about a lot of social change. The current sort of centre-right approach is to do the same, but just more slowly, which is why a lot of the craziness continues.
Okay, well, it seems like people aren't necessarily changing their views. So the latest Roy Morgan poll has come out. Let's just have a quick look at the results. And basically what you'll see there up the top is a little lift to National, a little lift to Labour. The Greens have been punished. ACT has gone down a little bit. And New Zealand First has increased as well. In terms of the left-right split, you'll see that, in fact, the left side of National ACT and New Zealand First is increased, and Labour Green Māori Party overall has decreased. So that's interesting when you consider all of the, noise around the media. Are you surprised at kind of that gap widening in favour of the right-wing parties, Simon, especially given all the massive negative media that's been going on and how the government's taking us down the toilet?
Yeah, I think people see through the mainstream media. I think most actual Kiwis, regardless of their political persuasion, know that currently mainstream media just keeps hammering the government. They can't do anything without it being some sort of terrible conspiracy. So I think people are seeing through that. Overall, National ACT and New Zealand First will be pleased, but we've talked about polls before. In general terms, they're still sort of just holding. And like the screen you've got there for viewers at the moment, if, for example, New Zealand First fell under 5%, that's going to change big time.
Yeah.
So New Zealand First will be pleased at 7.5, but overall, it's pretty steady for all parties. And I don't know, I've said it before, I think a lot of people aren't just really switched on at the moment. Life's tough, things are expensive, people are just trying to get on with their jobs and looking after the kids, and that they're not really following a lot of politics, which is also why you're not seeing a lot of movement.
Okay, one of the other interesting things about the trend was I just had a look at the breakdown of women and men, and I've just circled there. What you find is that support for National ACT and New Zealand First is way stronger for men, but support for Labour Greens Māori Party is way stronger for the left, from women. So, and actually there was a report I saw just this morning that came out looking around the world, and it's a bit of a trend that men are supporting right-wing parties and women are supporting left-wing parties. I thought it was just because you'd left Parliament, and so all the women went back to the left-wing parties because you'd gone. But maybe it's not that. Is there some other theory going on here? Is it left-wing parties are nice and kind, and right-wing parties are brutal and masculine?
Well, firstly, I'm very disappointed you've got such a binary approach here. I mean, really, there should be another 342 columns. But no, facetiousness aside, look, this is not actually unusual. You've actually answered it in a very good way. I mean, the centre-right to women often, not all of course, but is often seen as a bit too hard, too economy focused, where the left-wing messages are more appealing. And then vice versa. Men don't want the cuddly, soft environmental message. They want to know about the economy and transport. So this has been around a long, long time.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, when you were in Parliament, were you aware that if you wanted to win the female vote, you had to go softly? I had some discussions with John Key around that exact issue, actually, and around the anti-smacking law and just the woman vote.
Yeah, it's a near obsession, certainly in the time I was in Parliament, across various leaders. And, at one level I could understand it. You've got to win votes to take government. But it was at times, for me personally, it won't surprise viewers that, I think compromising your political values to pick up some people who don't agree with you is not the right way forward. And actually, even in the most recent election, it hasn't been a swing of women to National or ACT or New Zealand First, which brought about the change. So, at the end of the day, I'm someone politically who believes you put forward your values and your principles and you explain them so that people want to come and join you. If all you're going to do is capitulate what you stand for to buy, if you will, a few votes, then, well, what good are you?
Okay, just a couple of quick comments. Lynette, greetings from Christchurch. Hello, Lynette. Amanda says hi from Wairarapa. Rosie, the Greens are a party of lunatics. Obviously, Rosie is a psychiatrist. Amanda says left supports all the liberal rubbish and constantly contradicts themselves. And Neil says left-wing parties nice and kind, not to the unborn, for example. True, and not to confused young teenagers. They're happy to chemicalise and castrate them. And we will actually come to that point in just a minute. Now, these are some signs that were seen around, let's just get that one there. These signs were seen around Victoria University, and it was participants that they wanted to talk about the issue of stigma towards pedophiles. And it was based on this, a study that was being done for a PhD, testing the effect of educational modules, in other words, indoctrination, for reducing stigma towards people with a sexual attraction to children. This is at Victoria University. This is for a PhD. And so we did a bit of research on this, and they said, we are going to explore the effect of participants' personal exposure to people with a sexual attraction and their knowledge sources on their attitudes towards people with a sexual attraction to children. And then it says, the study aims to explore the effect of modules on stigma towards people with a sexual attraction, myths and stereotypes around this attraction, non-offending pedophiles, which is kind of an oxymoron, and reducing stigma towards people with a sexual attraction to children is important for mitigating the negative consequences of stigma, like their mental health. They do say it's about ideally reducing the risk of sexual offending, but that kind of seems to be a late-term thing. Now, are you surprised to see this kind of push in academia to, basically normalise pedophilia? It's not the first and it's not the last time, is it?
No, sadly, I'm not surprised. I mean, let's be clear, I didn't know about this study until yourself actually exposed it. So thanks to you and Family First for that. But I'm not surprised, because actually this is just the repeated playbook around a whole lot of other social and progressive issues. You just try to change the language. So instead of paedophilia, it's now minor attracted persons, or even better, we just call it MAP. Just use an acronym. And then let's just try to normalise the conversations about it. They'll start referencing what happened in ancient Rome, which had a much more fluid sexuality. It's all the same playbook. And they'll just keep basically chipping away, as they've done, Bob, with other topics. So no, it doesn't surprise me. But look, it's sick. It's as simple as that. Yeah. It's completely and utterly sick. And stigma's good. Not in every case, but actually stigma exists for a reason.
I know that some groups are trying to reduce it to like a sexual attraction or a sexual orientation, which, is quite disturbing. And Actually, Exodus Cry, an organisation that opposes sex trafficking and sexual exploitation, they echoed what you said. They said, sometimes stigma is good. Some things should be stigmatised. The compulsion to abuse children is not a morally neutral one. It should be stigmatised. In other words, attract social disapproval. Anyway, I think Victoria University may be being pounded with complaints about this particular study. Not the first time. Somebody sent me a study that had been done, a PhD in 2018 from Massey University. So, it's not the first time that we have come across that. Now, speaking of exploiting confused young people, the Spin-Off, a left-wing blog site, has released this article wanting to know what's happened to the evidence brief that the Ministry of Health's supposed to be doing on puberty blockers. Have you got any idea exactly what's going on here? Because, they've been changing things online and saying that they're reversible, and then sort of in the dark of night when they think nobody's watching, but we are, they remove that, that they're fully reversible. They were supposed to release this briefing last December. It's now September. So 10 months, 9 months, and nothing to see here. So what's happening in the halls of power?
So I can only speculate because I don't specifically know, but I would say there are competing pressures here, and the minister and the government don't quite know what to do. So they just keep pushing things out. And what I mean by that is it's been clear that New Zealand's Ministry of Health, and actually even the minister, have been relatively happy with gender-affirming care and the use of puberty blockers and all the usual stuff. You had in that Spin-Off article the mistruths that these are harmless, it stops suicide ideation, all the usual nonsense. That was their position. Then all we know was the Cass report came out. A firm, robust study which said, hey, actually there's some real concerns. And so since then, I think it's harder for ministers, for the Ministry of Health to hold their line, including the fact, as you know, Bob, the UK, Scandinavian countries, they're all changing direction. So I suspect in those halls of power, the sensible-minded, scientifically minded are saying, we can't repeat what we have in the past. But I suspect, too, a lot of these trans lobbyists and others, the WPATH equivalent in New Zealand, PATHA is what we call our one, they will be lobbying very hard. And at the end of the day, I don't think the ministry or minister knows how to jump, which way to move.
No, I mean, part of me says that they were going to put out a report, and then when the Cass report came out, they thought to themselves, wow, we can't put out our report because it's all based on ideology. Here's some science, which, the Cass report has, and suddenly they've had to go back to the drawing board. And the articles that I read suggested that Matt Ducey, the Minister of Health and Associate Minister of Health, has actually seen the briefing but won't release it. So there's some nervousness around this whole issue, and so there should be. Hopefully it's because of pressure that parents have been putting on.
I'd hope so. I mean, this is one of those topics that actually, for listeners, do message your MP, and just say, look, this is a concern. Look at the international evidence. And look, I think you've summed it up well. The evidence is nearly overwhelming now, and the practice is changing around the world. But I worry that the government doesn't want to offend those trans lobbyists, the gender-affirming care lobbyists. And you see it in the Spin-Off article. A reporter that's got no idea what he's talking about, basically pushing the same old tired lines. And they're the ones, they're desperate, Bob. They're desperate to get this briefing out to affirm what they're doing. And they're scared that actually they might follow the science for once. That would be novel, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I meant to show you the image of the week, and it was actually this one. It's your old boss, Christopher Luxon, and he's on social media, and Elon Musk, the owner of X, has actually retweeted him and said, I like this New Zealand Prime Minister. So there we are. He's getting a bit of profile. But one of the things I was fascinated with, Simon, is that actually as I was driving to the studio here, I was listening to an interview with Christopher Luxon, who's in South Korea at the moment, and apparently there's no media with him. The only person is One News reporter Benedict Collins. I mean, you've done a few trips with the Prime Minister and ministerial trips. Don't the the media follow you around in hordes and wanting interviews all the time? I mean, one media outlet suggests to me either that they don't want to give Luxon any oxygen, they're whining about the fact that they're not being funded by the government, which could be another thing, or maybe they're broke and they can't afford to actually get over to South Korea to cover it. Which is it?
I think it's more the latter. Again, I don't know. We can only speculate. You're ahead of me on this one. I didn't realise that no media had gone. I think it's ultimately twofold. One, it's cost. Yeah, I think it's ultimately twofold. One is cost. The various media outlets have said it's just not, well, we just don't want to spend that money. And that'll be related to the second point, is they actually don't see much newsworthiness in the trip. They might actually have a point, and that's no offence. I've dealt with the South Korean government, going to Malaysia, and that's all very important. But I suspect the newsrooms just went, well, what are they really doing there? Are there any notable announcements? And do we expect anything to come from it? And they've said no, and actually very little has come from it. So maybe, Bob, in this case, the mainstream media were right.
Okay, and we haven't actually got to our list of topics that we originally agreed on, because there was a whole lot of things that came up at the last minute, like the Victoria University thing and the puberty blocker studying and the Roy Morgan poll, which came out last night. I mean, we are as fresh as a loaf of bread from the baker. But there was also this report, this graph, which should interest us all. And this is the euthanasia deaths per quarter since the law passed. And if you can't quite see that, and you're not listening to Ginny Anderson, that is actually increasing gradually. Ginny Anderson, of course, isn't too good at graphs, is she, Simon? But the latest assisted dying report has come out. They call it assisted dying. We call it assisted suicide or euthanasia, or killing off vulnerable people. And there has been a 5% increase in deaths in the last year overall. Basically, 83% of New Zealand, European Pākehā are going for euthanasia. So it's not the Pacifica, Māori, Asian, they're not fans of euthanasia. It's white people. It's virtually even split between male and female. But there was two stats that were interesting that I thought I'd just get a comment from you, Simon. That is that 1 in 4 applicants for euthanasia weren't receiving palliative care, which raises a question about, is it because they can't access it, can't afford it, it's not available at their hospital? But the other one that was also concerning was that just 1% of applicants had a psychiatric assessment to check for both competency and for the presence of coercion. So basically there is no check to see if there's an underlying psychological issues or depression because of what they're facing. So, I mean, what's your response to what you've heard of the report so far?
Well, of course, the first point to make is that they've tried to keep the release of this report relatively quiet.
Yeah.
There's actually some good sleuthing by Family First that found it. So it better be clear to viewers, it's not hidden. It's just that it was put up on a website. There were no media release, no comment, no commentary whatsoever. So that's the first thing. Secondly, as per that graph, but it's what people will intuitively know, we're following the Canadian model, which means that every year the numbers just go up and up and up. And, it's important to bear that in mind, that we're already euthanizing hundreds of people, and David Seymour and his mates want to expand it even further. But on your 2 points, so 1 in 4 people are not receiving palliative care, yet are seeking and taking euthanasia. That is actually quite serious. If you are at the threshold to allow euthanasia, you should be receiving palliative care. And really important for viewers to understand, that doesn't mean you're in a particular hospital ward all plugged into morphine drips. What that means is you're actually receiving that wider compassionate care which is required, which is often at your home. May not even be anything pharmacological. It may just be that support. And then the second one, for me, is the most outrageous. It is beyond comprehension that 1% of people only require a psychological assessment to do with competence. Because if you've been around death, dying, suffering, or you know anything about end-of-life healthcare, people are very vulnerable. They're often very depressed, quite anxious. I mean, it's normal. Viewers who themselves have had, a cancer diagnosis, it's pretty depressing. So the idea that these doctors doing the assessment, and bear in mind, Bob, only one person has to physically see you of the two doctors, somehow these doctors are competent enough, because they're not psychologists, often they're just general practitioners. Well, no offense to GPs, by the way, but it's not their specialty. They're deciding that actually 99 out of 100 people, there's no coercion, there's no stress, there's no depression, no nothing. That's beyond comprehension.
Okay, and the other thing that is important to note is that it doesn't have to be your family doctor. It could be any doctor. You could actually go shopping for a euthanasia doctor. Not that there's many. The good news is that a minority, it's tiny. It's like a couple of percentage of doctors actually want to even be involved in this thing, similar to abortion as well. But so you can go shopping for a euthanasia doctor, and then they get a second opinion from a doctor who doesn't even need to talk to you as the patient. It just seems wide open to abuse. And it's about the right to get euthanasia, but it's not about the right to good palliative care.
Yeah, I mean, our palliative care system is amazing at one level. Those involved in hospice and so forth, it's just amazing. But there's an inequity of access across the country. There's not enough funding, for example. Actually, Maggie Barry, then myself, when we were in Parliament, were proposing legislation to actually guarantee more stable funding into hospices, for example. And you all know it because there's hospice shops and fundraisers. That's how they're trying to find the money. You talked about the doctors. There's only about 150 of them across New Zealand. So very, very few, because most doctors don't want to be part of this. So that personally for me raises significant questions about those that do, because they make a business of it. Because, of course, euthanasia, Bob, as you know, is fully funded for the doctor. You can't really pay the person dying. They don't really do much with the money after death. But, yeah, it doesn't have to be the family doctor. It's just a doctor, and the second can just read the notes, and it just goes from there. And there are no safeguards. Don't be fooled by what pro-euthanasia advocates say. There are no safeguards. What there is just a process. And we've identified in this report, again, the safeguard around coercion or the fact that you could be depressed clearly isn't there. 1 in 100 people are referred to a psychologist. The other 99, despite being terminally ill and facing death, are perfectly fine, happy, cognizant, not depressed, not anxious. It's all tickety-boo, but I still want to end my life. I mean, just unfathomable.
Okay, Kevin says in the report the percentages were not per capita, so they don't really mean anything. I think the key thing is, Kevin, is that we've examined the numbers based on population compared to other countries like Canada and Belgium and the Netherlands that have allowed for euthanasia, and we are up there, but it's the trend as well in that graph, which you can see. I mean, the graph clearly shows that there is a increasing number, gradually, slowly going up. So sure, second year, so I guess we have to take that into account and see what the trend is. Daryl says, won't be long before the loony lefties redefine the word euthanasia to also mean palliative care. Actually, somebody, who was it, Charmaine, said, just a comment from Christine Rankin, who was on Straight Talk on Monday night, that said palliative care or hospice is free. That is true, Simon, isn't it? It is free. The problem is that in some areas, some hospitals don't have palliative care specialists, and hospices still have to fundraise. Like you say, we've got a hospice up the road, and across the road is a shop selling fundraising for the hospice. So it's sort of free, but is it free?
Well, there's nothing. And thanks, Charmaine, for your comment, but nothing's free. There's always someone's got to pay somewhere in the background, and hospices in particular might be giving their service free to families and to people, but actually they need to find the money somewhere, and they're not getting much from government. So it is all the bake sales and the secondhand shops and fundraisers in general trying to claw the money in. So nothing's ever free. The second point is the equity of access. So if you're in Auckland or Wellington or Dunedin, there's great palliative care. But actually, in a lot of other parts of the country, if you're in rural New Zealand, if you're in the back blocks of Northland, where I, born and raised, there ain't the services. There's not even often the GPs allowed to access the drugs to prescribe. So there's just a myriad of problems.
Okay, well, look, you've segued into a topic that we were going to cover, and I think it might be worth us just doing that, and that is that there are some groups of GPs suggesting that the whole GP system, basically a family doctor, is going into extinction. Here's just a little bit of the TV report.
By the Herald's report showing patients queuing in the cold in Otara. What did you make of the queues outside the Otara clinic?
Heartbreaking, but predictable. I think it's a good summary. And we're going to see many more of that unless we have really urgent intervention very soon and very aggressive.
Those queuing told the Herald they started lining up at 6 a.m, hours before the clinic opened, due to long wait times and problems getting appointments with other GPs whose books were full.
We shouldn't see this. This is a developed country. We expect to see pictures like that in third world countries, Bangladesh and Myanmar, but not in New Zealand. I think probably what's also heartbreaking is you probably wouldn't see that in Remuera. So we saw this new government come in on a platform of getting away with postcode lottery and trying to address equity, and that's probably the most frightening demonstration of inequity that you could possibly ask for in primary care in New Zealand. We should not be seeing that.
Do you think the government is prioritising the GP crisis?
Absolutely not, and not this government and not the last few governments.
Why not those?
Good question. I think when it comes to election time, general practice issues are just basically not election worthy. It's a very unattractive platform to stand on. The irony of it is we have evidence after evidence showing that if we invest in general practice, we save 10 times that figure down the track in secondary care. So it's false economy to invest in secondary care, but it attracts votes, and that's what's really frustrating.
All right, what do you think of his comments, Simon?
It's one of these ones, Bob, that at one level there's actually quite a lot of truth to what he's saying, but there's also, to me, my political radar is saying there's a little bit of an agenda as well. So, let's be clear, primary care, so that's your general practitioner, nurse practitioners and others, they are under enormous pressure. And they have been for many years over multiple governments. And what you are seeing is a lot, probably many viewers, a bit like, my own family. We used to have our family doctor, but as they've got older, they've decided to sell their practice to one of these big players. And it's got more corporate. And ultimately, we haven't trained enough GPs. We're not bringing enough into the country, and all of this happening. But at the same time, having chaired the health committee, I can say, yep, he's right. More money in primary care that will assist 10 times. Well, yep, that's true. But also we put more money into pharmaceuticals. That also has a massive benefit. So there's where do you want to squeeze the balloon? And the last thing I would suggest, and it's I don't know if Michael Mora touched on this, and I better be clear, I don't know what specific clinic those people were at, but a lot of clinics
that was
these
an
days, and I suspect there are clinics that do not have bookings. There's actually a couple of major providers of primary healthcare, so GP practices that do not have bookings. So you and I are probably familiar. Call up your doctor. Can I come in 2:00 on Friday? Thanks very much. But that's not the case in a number of practices. And I don't want to take away from, obviously, people queuing up, but I think it can give a little bit of context, perhaps, of what is happening there.
Okay. Nicholas says, my GP said the horrendous waste of money on naming everything in Te Reo could have been better spent. They wasted millions. Daryl says, interesting that government on both sides of politics have let us down on health for many years. Well, Simon, you were in government for 6 years of your career, and you were in opposition for 6 years. Do you think that's a fair statement?
At one level, I agree, but at another, I don't. I mean, it could more be done in health? Yes, but you know what? Actually, every government struggles. Doesn't matter if it's left or right. We don't wake up going, how do we screw up the health system? What we do is we wake up and go, oh my God, the need is so enormous and the costs are astronomical. Where to put the priorities? And look, I used to say, again, when I chaired the health committee, we could double the health budget tomorrow. I mean, it would have a huge consequence on New Zealand's overall budget, but you know, just for theory's sake, we could double the budget tomorrow and we would still have many of the problems. It's just healthcare is enormously expensive, expensive.
Yep. The African Sheep says the expert mentioned it wouldn't be happening in Remuera. I'm in Parnell. Takes over a week to get an appointment, and the price has tripled since the start of 2024, which actually I got a text just yesterday from our family doctor in Papakura saying that exact same thing, the increase as well. So they're feeling the expenses. And Matt says, if there is not a family doctor to see other families about their needs, then who is responsible for the care of families today? And look, Simon, that raises a very good point, is that are a whole lot of people turning up to ED and putting pressure on our hospitals because they're not getting that initial care from the doctor because either they haven't made the appointment or they can't get in to make an appointment, or they haven't got a family doctor and they don't know where to start. I mean, that's where I think his comments did make a lot of sense, that if you do primary care well, you prevent the sort of urgent stuff turning up on hospital doorsteps and putting them under pressure.
Oh, look, 100%. And this is why I say he's right in some regards. And ultimately, we don't have enough GPs. We have a model of care which doesn't incentivize people going in to be GPs. To put it really crudely, after you've done your 5 years of medical school, you're better off doing another year or two and becoming an ophthalmologist or an orthopod and making huge money versus the hours, the stress, and the lower pay in comparison. Being a general practitioner. So we don't respect general practice. We don't have enough of them. The model doesn't work. So it doesn't matter if it's long queues in South Auckland by stereotype, or the fact is, was it African Sheep had mentioned that, you know, getting an appointment in Remuera or Wellington Central, wherever, can take a long, long time. So it's clearly not working. And yes, it does flow into the EDs. You know, got ill family at the moment. Spending a lot of time in hospitals. It's very clear that the EDs are swamped and the staff are beyond stressed. So it's not in a good space, but let's be clear about that.
Okay, well, you know things are in a really bad space when a woman who's just given birth can't get toast and tea. And there was a massive outcry. Where was it? Capital Coast and Hutt Valley. Apparently their food budget overspent $1.5 million. I mean, who really believes that the food you get at hospitals, you know, had an overspend of $1.5 million. I mean, I can't believe they even spent that much. But one of the interesting things was, just as I read this article, is that Health New Zealand said, well, the reason we stopped doing, and also there is an update on this story. There we are, they've done a U-turn because of the media coverage. Shane Retty, the Minister of Health, getting involved. And one thing you never do is upset a woman before birth or after birth. I've learnt that 3 times from experience. But Health New Zealand said it started offering a post-birth meal in August because it was more nutritious. So their defence is simply that the food hasn't gone, but they're actually providing something more nutritious, which, I mean, sort of does, once again, in the nuance of it all, does make sense, but you just don't upset mums at that time of their life, do you? That's the moral of the story.
That's where I'd land on it. I mean, I'm obviously no expert, but
We aren't.
It's yeah. I mean, it's again someone with a lack of wherefore, a little bit of a political radar within all those various departments in Health New Zealand to have gone. Is this going to translate well? I mean, good on Shane Reddy stepping in, but it's a little bit ridiculous too when you think about it. Not about him personally, but it requires a minister to step in and say, "Can you please just put some toast in?" And I suppose you could begin to make the argument when what other areas should there be lots of choice, but there is something quite profound and special about someone giving birth. And if mum wants toast and a cup of tea, then get it for her. It just really.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should have tea and toast for mums, but this is public enemy number one. And they are called, what are they called? They're called calming something like
calming measures.
Calming measures or something. And the problem is that, the good thing is that our good friend Simeon Brown, who is the Minister of Transport, says you're not spending another cent of government money on these stinking raised things that cause all sorts of problems. In fact, just as I was preparing for this, Simon, I found this article from March where it said the Professional Firefighters Union says fire vehicles are being damaged and response times are being compromised by speed bumps and other traffic calming measures. I mean, calming, that is not the word. I figured out that as we drive to church on Sunday morning, we have to go over, it's about 8 calming measures. And I can tell you, they do not calm me down. In fact, I need to be in church after going over those calming measures. And the interesting thing, and apparently the area that I live, Manarewa, has the worst spend up of all calming measures in New Zealand, apparently, because we're all such terrible drivers in South Auckland. But I always felt sorry for the person who's just dislocated their hip and they're sitting in the ambulance and the ambulance is going over every calming measure, which is re-dislocating it. But I would just say Simeon Brown is listening to the people. He's getting flack from greenies and from lefties, but the fact of the matter is most New Zealanders think, finally get rid of those things that are a pain in the backside.
Look, 100%.
Literally.
Good story literally a pain in the backside and on the vehicles. But I mean, good way to confirm that you do go to church on Sunday. Well played there.
Thank you. Actually, I just have to show you this. Panda says, damn speed humps on the way to church. First world problems. It is. My blood pressure goes through the roof anyway. It's even worse. It goes higher. My blood pressure goes higher than when I watch the 6 o'clock news. Anyway, back to you, Simon.
Oh, look, I mean, it's only a small anecdote, but I've got a friend who lives next to them, and all day and all night, it's a thump-thump, the thump-thump. So, I mean, that's only a small anecdote. That's not the reason to get rid of them. You've talked about the fire service, ambulance, police. I mean, look, fundamentally, there are a few places where a calming measure or a speed bump makes sense. But it's the near ubiquity. I mean, they're everywhere now. Oh, excuse me. They're everywhere now. I'm just getting emotional even just thinking about this, but they're just too many of them. There's just too many of them. They cost a fortune in the grand scheme of things. They narrow roads, all of this. It's basically driven by ideology, which is why the Greens are up in arms. They're the ones who want more speed bumps. They want narrow roads. They want your buses that don't pull into bus stops. They want you to block the traffic. They want to do anything they can to get you out of their cars. So good on Simeon saying we're not doing this anymore, and with a spot of luck, rips a few of them up.
Yep. Daryl says maybe we need a minister for toast. Nicola Joy
some ministers become toast.
Nicola Joy's with me. It's infuriating, lol. Neil says Simeon talking sense again. Ben says that there's 3 in Ohaupo on State Highway 3. Where's that? Is that near Taupo? Ohaupo?
Oh, no, you put me on the spot. Certainly.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, Ben, you better tell us. You've found us out. Our geography's failed.
And Rosie says paramedics have painkillers and can give them to patients. As they're in midair. with their dislocated hip. All right. Now, these terrible. Oh, here he is. He says near Hamilton. Haupo is near Hamilton. There we go.
Yeah, I've just looked it up.
You
Just
should
south
know
of
that.
the-
You've just
south
been
of the
down.
airport.
You've just been down there
Yeah, but I took-
speaking in Hamilton.
I had, but I took the new motorway, not State
Okay.
Highway 3.
And they let you leave Hamilton as well. Right. Boot camps. Terrible, nasty, mean things. Should be absolutely scrapped. Here was a little bit of coverage about them.
Training Centre. It was meant to give him the skills needed to leave his life of crime.
Oh, sorry. I'll just restart that again because I got caught out there. Let's just go back. You can tell I'm well prepared today,
Boot
aren't you?
camp where the government wants to send New Zealand's toughest young criminals. It's at Oranga Tamariki's Palmerston North Youth Justice Facility, set to open on July 29. While it's military style, the Minister admits it's unlikely that young offenders would be eligible to join the Defence Force. What's the point in the military style? Why have that if actually the Defence Force will not want these children?
It's about routine and structure.
But this won't be the first boot camp New Zealand has seen. Survivors of abuse and sick care worry the government is repeating mistakes of the past.
Back in the early 70s, I was in a boot camp. Well, the boot camp of that day, detention centres, I think they were called, based on a military style program, if you like.
As a teenager, Paula Sweeney was sent here to Kohitiri Boys Training Centre. It was meant to give him the skills needed to leave his life of crime. Instead, he faced horrendous abuse and became a founding member of the mongrel mob.
We were fit.
Okay, so there's a pretty strong theme coming through from that report that boot camps are basically abuse centres. The building looks absolutely dilapidated. I'm sure it wasn't like that at the time. But the interesting thing is that they've actually done an Official Information Act request, and it was from Oranga Tamariki about this new boot camp. And this is what you'll get if you go on boot camp, Simon. I'm actually thinking of sending the Family First staff on it. You get to journal, take walks on the beach, engage with a therapist. You also talk about life priorities. Yes, there is some discipline, but it's basically built around physical activities. There's high ropes courses, camping, doing neighbourhood walks. I think I might already be in boot camp. And then there's also some really mean type of stuff, like I said, the journaling. And what was the other thing that I noticed? I mean, it just sounded like just the type of thing that nobody would want to go to, because you get good food. You also get someone to be a mentor for you, and you can also visit a marae or a church, go to the museum. You can learn mo'orako, which is a Māori martial art form, life skills, CV writing, interviewing skills, cooking, dressing to a standard, Simon, and growing food, and there's even a careers day. So, I mean, that just sounds... Oh, and there's also teaching on emotional regulation and coping strategies. So, I mean, that just sounds like a hellhole that we're just, sending kids just to completely end all hope in their lives. Or maybe it's not.
Yeah, I mean, you can take two things at least from this. I mean, this is unfortunately very biased reporting. That they've made a decision, as have most of the people opposing, boot camps, youth camps. I mean, even the term boot camps is actually erroneous. The government would do well to avoid using the term. But they've decided, the journalist or media, a lot on the left, have decided these are bad. And so they're going to find any reason to try and attack them. And that story was a good example. I mean, talk about conflating a whole series of issues. It's terrible, obviously, what happened to that man who's now the founding member, or one of the founding members of the mongrel mob. But, that was, 30, 40 years ago? The emotional use of imagery of a dilapidated old building. I mean, this is the mischief that we often talk about. I mean, at the end of the day, there are some young people who will respond to a little bit of structure and discipline. And personally, I don't see what's wrong with that. In fact, the listing of stuff that you've read out, that's going to be good for a whole lot of young ones. Not everyone, but that's not the point. And this is what the government's trying to do, is actually a range of options. And that maybe, Bob, is at the real heart of this, is that the last government in particular was focused on trying to create a single, if you will, type of education. They don't like charter schools, they don't like integrated schools, they don't like private schools. They just want one state system so that they can run the curriculum and indoctrinate your young ones. It's as simple as that.
Yep. Okay, we thought we would normally go 30 to 40 minutes, but I notice we've been going 50 minutes, so we're well over time. So we will call it a day there. We've covered a lot of topics. Just a reminder that we are back on Monday night with Straight Talk, and Simon is on the panel with that with me and some others. Tuesday morning, Simon's got his solid ground at 8 a.m. for the bright and early, first bird get the worm or whatever it is. And Wednesday night, we've got a special. I'm actually hosting a live McBlog because it's our 400th episode of McBlog. So Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, we're going to be just having a bit of a chat and showing you the top 10 McBlogs. And then Thursday, we'll be back for more political playback. We didn't get through half that list, Simon. Could you contact your mates in Wellington and just tell them to calm the farm a little bit? Maybe put some road bumps in Parliament to slow them down?
Got bad news for you, Bob. This is actually a recess week, so Parliament's not even sitting. So brace.
We are toast. Okay, well, with that, thank you, Simon, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching, team. This is Political Playback. Good night.